What is success as a developer? The perfect playtesters for any game dev out there, and why you should be excited about psychological horror first-person platformer The Unknown. Let's talk about that. In 2023, right? I think there were so many games that got released. 12,000 plus alone got released on Steam. We're not even to the end of the year yet while we're filming this video. So there are so many games out there this year. When you look at indie development and you look at how many people are making games and the expectations lumped on top of those games, I think a lot of people, they struggle with what they think of as success for a title, right? They struggle with the financial decisions and all of these other expectations that come along with that. So for you, as somebody who's been making your game for about 5 years now, you're looking towards your release here in the near future. What do you see as an important milestone for success or an important mindset for a successful release of a game?
I think in the indie game world, there's this normalized definition of what success should look like. And I feel like a lot of new indies are really kind of hyper-focused on certain numbers. Like, for example, if you Google it or you look up like certain YouTubers who talk about how to make a successful game, they're going to tell you that you need 10 to 20,000 wish lists by launch. You need to make 6 figures or else your game is not successful, right? So for me, I kind of got into a bad habit of being a bit obsessed with my daily wish list. I would look at them and think, if I don't get 20 a day, then I really got to rethink the way I'm doing marketing, or I got to try to figure out what I should do different in order to get 20 a day. And that's kind of all I would focus on, And I got to a point where I would lose focus and I wasn't productive with my project. I wasn't getting anything done. And so I'm trying to do my best and avoid these conversations and certain expectations. So for me, I'm really trying to focus on like what a personal success would look like. So for me, it would be, just making back the money I put into the game. So it's a $100 Steam fee. And if I had like 10, 20 people who really enjoy the game and got it, they had a good time playing it, it'd make me feel good. And, it'd make me feel more encouraged to continue making games and make games in the future.
So when I look at games today, right, and I think about the players that play those games, I think a decade ago, 15, 20 years ago, there was a pretty set market that played video games, really. And then as we've progressed outside of that, I think there's a plethora of different cultures and genders and ages that are all playing video games right now. And it's something that has really changed the dynamic of the industry because you have more stories that feel like they want to be included, and then developers have to kind of juggle how they go about doing that. So kind of as you make this game, or just looking at other games within the market, how do you think that audience type has changed? And then how do you think that influences the kind of games that are getting made?
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. Like, if you think, I don't know, back in the day when you think of indie games, I feel like it was kind of only like the hipsters of games really playing indie games, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't this big audience where the average gamer would be playing AAA and indie games. So yeah, there's definitely quite a big audience now towards indies. And as a developer, it's encouraging, but it's also a little bit intimidating, because now I feel that the bigger the audience there is for indie games, the more indie games are going to be released, and therefore saturating the market. It's already difficult, to get your game noticed and seen by other people, but now you have all these other games and titles that you could be competing with. So yeah, it's a little intimidating, but it's also kind of nice because personally as a gamer, I feel like there hasn't been a lot of really good titles that have come out in the past, like, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, Like, I feel like back in the day when a new game came out, it was like amazing, it was awesome, it was a great story, but now they're all kind of just getting a bit dull, and maybe people are just getting sick of that, and they're realizing there's all these indies out there creating these amazing stories, and it's really cool. It's really encouraging. I really hope that more people play more indie games, and I hope that audience comes a lot bigger. For indies too, like, we have all this freedom creation, right? We don't have all these publishers that we have to sort of satisfy, right? We can kind of create whatever we want. We can make these shorter story-rich games and have a more of a quality experience than actual scale.
From a technical standpoint, right? Did you have a background in coding? Were you an artist? What kind of led you into this specific aspect of development where you're making your own title now?
So I learned everything from YouTube. I have no previous schooling or experience at all. I just looked up tutorials for years and years. I still watch tutorials. Like, I feel like every dev, watches tutorials, doesn't matter how big or small they are. That's pretty important. But I always kind of wanted to make games. Like, when I was really young, I watched this show in the early 2000s. It's called Art Attack. I don't know if you heard of it, but it was a kid's show, and it was like a British TV show, and this guy, he would show kids how to like draw and make crafts, and at the end of the episode he'd make these sort of elaborate, I don't even know what you would call them, they're just like these creations out of like barrels, for example. He'd be in this big field and he'd line up all these barrels and rope, and they'd zoom out and make this crazy canvas, right? It was cool. I love that show. And one of the episodes, they took you into an animation studio, and I had no idea that you could make animation. You know, I thought like you had to be a company. I don't know what that meant, but I thought that only a company can make animations in games, right? And so after he kind of showed you how you can make animations, I was like, man, I could do that. Like I could make games. And so I was super little, and I wanted to make games, and I just kind of started watching tutorials, and then 15 plus years later, making my first release.
It's interesting because, to your point, like animations back in the day, right? I talked to a couple different developers recently, or I guess not recently, but I've talked to developers in the past who, they're probably double my age, right? They're like 40s, 50s, somewhere around there. They've been making games since like the OG era of gaming. And I remember asking one developer what engine he had used when he like started making games when he first started out, which I think was like the 90s, or maybe a little bit before the 90s, but quite a while ago. And he kind of laughed. He was like, oh, we didn't have engines back then. He was just like, we coded that, you know, from the ground up. You know, we didn't have engines at that time. And it's interesting. It's interesting to think about that because like the industry has changed so much. I mean, you have so many tools nowadays. You have so many things you can lean into and assets, and you have freelancers out there that you can just hit up on the internet and be like, hey, you want to, you know, jump on my title with me? And back then you just did not have that. You know, you had like a couple people in a team that came together and then they just built it from the ground up with nothing. And it's like, I always ask them the question, do you think making games is easier now, or do you think it was easier then? You know, they would say kind of the same thing. It was harder to get off the ground then because you needed that skill set of coding and all putting those things together and knowing how to do it. But there was really only one way to do it back then. There was only one way to get it from, you know, start to finish. Nowadays, there's a million ways to do it. And there's so many tools, and there's so many options, and there's so much more competition that it's just so much more difficult. And I never really thought about it from that perspective. But I mean, for you with this game, right? I mean, in terms of just your engine and other tools you're using, how do you approach that? What tools do you use, and how do you kind of blend them together to get from beginning to end when you're building levels and you're, you know, creating out of the enemies and you're creating these puzzles? Kind of how does that workflow go for you?
For me, like this is just a hobby, right? So I don't have a budget at all.
Yeah.
All the software and programs I use, they're all completely free. I had to do a lot of research to finding all these alternatives, right? So for the game engine, I use Unreal Engine 4. I use an old version actually, because when I first started out making games, you know, the engine would receive updates. I noticed as these updates happen and certain things in the game would break, and it'd be really frustrating. So I'd have no idea, but certain like coding aspects they would either modify or just completely remove, and it just screwed up the whole gaming development process. So I stuck to this old version from 2019. I haven't touched it since, and so that's what I use for my game engine. And it works fine, right? But for the assets, I've made almost everything in the game. Everything in the demo I've made all myself, and I use Blender, which is a free 3D animation program. It's pretty standard, you know. I feel like a lot of people use Blender. That you can create your models and then you can directly import them into Unreal Engine right away and use those. And then I also use GIMP, which is a free version of Photoshop.
You and me both.
Pretty expensive, right? So GIMP's pretty good.
Yeah.
For audio too, I use Audacity and FL Studio. But FL Studio you do have to pay for. You can use it for free as long as you don't like close the program, you know. So you can work on your audio, you can edit it, you just can't save it, right? So
interesting.
When I'm using FL Studio, I got to make sure that I'm going to finish within a few hours, or else I lose that file forever. But yeah, it's been working for me.
I think a lot of developers, when they go into a game, like especially indie developers, they don't have playtesters, right? So they don't really have anybody test their game till they get to the very end of it. Have you like scaled your playtesting though yet? Have you done like a demo for this game where you're trying to get a lot of people in there to like go in and just break it in certain places, or how has that worked for you?
It's kind of waiting a bit until I get to the finish line. I do have a few friends that have been playtesting for me, which I've been really grateful for, but they're also my friends, right? So they're not really, I don't know how reliable they are. I don't know if they're just being nice and like, this is good, right? Yeah, so I mean, I don't really have a lot of play testers other than my kids, and just kind of the feedback I've gotten from the demo that I have on Steam. I let my kids play it. My 9-year-old and my 6-year-old, because it's so funny. I've had a few people stream the game, and like it's just really interesting to see how people actually play your game that have never played it before.
Yeah.
And so I'll have people on these streams. They'll be walking around and they'll be looking at things that I've never even thought of. Right? They'll be looking at the ground and looking at cracks in the wall. And oh, I can see out of the wall. And I started letting my kids do that because they do the same thing, kids that just kind of bob around and they just so yeah, they're my best play testers. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback from Steam. Just watching people play it is really helpful, and I'm trying to use what I've learned from my demo and try to apply that to the rest of my levels, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that I didn't realize is how much people really look around in games, So for example, if I have a scene where you're walking down a hall and there's something that happens that I need you to look at, and in the demo I found that people, when that's happening, they just kind of look away from it, and like I don't understand why. So from that I had to go back through my whole game and like fix the camera right down the hallway so you're forced to watch it,
Yeah.
And it's crazy. So I just kind of take the feedback from the demo and I've been applying it, and then letting my kids walk through it, and that's kind of what I'm basing it all off.
Give me the elevator pitch for the game itself, right? What's it about? What makes it unique? What makes this game stand out? How is the gameplay going to unfold? Is there going to be a story? How impactful is that story going to be? I mean, all these different factors coming together. Kind of walk me through that one.
Yeah, so the game is very much story driven. I can't really get too much into the story because I don't want to ruin it, right? But so yeah, it's a psychological horror first person platformer. You're pretty much stuck inside the mind of the main character. And there's a voice that's tormenting you throughout the entire game. Throughout the game, you have to like navigate deadly obstacles, and you have to overcome these puzzles and all these inner demons that the main character has kind of tucked away. And so, yeah, as you progress, this voice is constantly trying to like bring you down, bringing up the past a lot, and you really have to deal with all these things that you've gone through that maybe the main character didn't want to deal with at a certain time. And it all kind of just unravels. I tried to design these levels so they didn't feel the same. I didn't want it to be like a slow-paced puzzle solving experience the whole time, right?
Yeah.
So some levels you will be able to take your time and kind of look around and find what you want to do, but then some other times you have to be quick. It's not a short game for sure. Like you definitely will get a couple hours worth of gameplay in there. And there's a guy named Jonas Pyroller. He's an indie developer on YouTube, and he was saying that he noticed in his games that only like 33% of players actually spoke English, and so by only making your game English, you're missing out on a huge amount of people, right? And so yeah, my game, like I said, it's being driven by this voice, right? So you have this voice that's leading you through the game and kind of bringing the story together. And localization is something that I'm definitely thinking about. My main focus right now, obviously, is finishing the game, but if I can have it localized by launch in a few languages, then I will do that. But it will definitely be something that will happen relatively soon after launch.
What about something like controller compatibility, right?
Yeah, when I first was starting with the project, I thought, oh yeah, of course, you have to make it controller compatible. But then I talked to a few friends who were really big gamers, and they were pretty honest with me, and they said that honestly, like having a controller compatible game isn't as important to them. Just having a playable game, right?
Yeah.
But for my game, to make it controller compatible, it would be fairly difficult, but not going the way that you might think. Like I can make the whole gameplay controller compatible within like an hour. Like it's that part's not hard. It's the menus that is such a pain because I don't know why, but Unreal Engine does not have a system for making UI and menus controller compatible. So you have to do it all by scratch. Yeah. It's really, really frustrating. So like, for example, if you had a menu that had like 4 options on it, you'd have to create some sort of math equation to have it like, have the first one be selected by default. And every time you press down, it would increase a number, therefore making the next button selected. It's a huge pain. And so my planned release for The Unknown is March 4th. And so far everything is doing good. Everything's on track. Post release, I'm just gonna focus on bug fixing. So I know there's gonna be tons of bug fixing. Like when I posted up the demo, I thought, this is perfectly polished, but man, was I wrong. So the next few weeks I'm gonna really listen to feedback and watch and see what people say, and I'm gonna be on top of that and trying to fix things and making the game even more perfect, because I'm gonna miss things. Like it's
inevitable,
everyone. But March 4th, everything's on track for March 4th, and I'm really gonna try to hit that date.